The dawn broke over the desert like a revelation. First a silent blue glow outlining the dunes, then a surge of molten gold that painted every grain of sand with promise. Yusuf felt the heat before he saw the sun, a warm breath against the nape of his neck, reminding him he was late. He wiped the sleep crust from the corners of his eyes and reached for the worn leather satchel that carried his world, a notebook swollen with marginalia, a cracked-spined translation of the Qur'an, 2 dates wrapped in paper, and the compass that no longer pointed anywhere but memory. The old scholars in Basra had told him the road to knowledge was walked by men who carried nothing more than patience and thirst. Yusuf carried both, yet he also carried memory, and memory was heavy. For years he had served as an apprentice to Sheikh Ibrahim, copying manuscripts in the silent alcoves of the library, illuminating the margins with meticulous vines and arabesques. Each afternoon the sheikh tested him. A verse from Surah Al-Kahf recited in Arabic, then in Yusuf's trembling English, then again in the tongue of his childhood, the Arabic shaping itself into a lullaby of meaning. Yusuf's longing had grown teeth. It gnawed at him through the calm hours of calligraphy and followed him into sleep. The more fluent he became in the language of revelation, the more questions sprouted in the cracks of certainty. Why did some hearts wake at a single verse while others slept through entire recitations? How did knowledge descend, like rain, sudden and nourishing, or rise, like smoke, coiling from embers of experience? He lingered over the passage in which Moses begged to follow the enigmatic servant of God, Kaid, so that you may teach me right guidance of what you have been taught. The words blazed against the parchment, a dare disguised as scripture. The night Sheikh Ibrahim died, a sandstorm roared in from the west, rattling the wooden shutters of the library and filling the corridors with a cry like mourners beating their chests. Yusuf held the old man's hand and listened to his final counsel. Knowledge is not a summit, but an ocean. Do not fear what you cannot see beneath the surface. The next morning, Yusuf sealed the library doors, tied the keys together with a green ribbon, the color of the Prophet's banner, and slipped them into the sheikh's breast pocket before the burial. Then he shouldered his satchel and stepped into the glare of possibility. The first week tested his resolve. The desert was a furnace during the day and a bone-chilling vault of stars at night. Once, he woke to the hiss of a viper gliding across his ankle. Another time, to the distant thrum of bandit hooves chasing a caravan under crescent moonlight. Yet in the solitude between these frights, he recited verses aloud, letting the sand soak up his doubts. And remember, he murmured, voice raw, when Moses said to his young companion, I will not stop until I reach the junction of the 2 seas, or I will journey on for ages. On the 12th day, he reached the outskirts of an oasis town whose name existed only in the oral maps of camel drivers. Mud brick homes clustered around a cracked minaret. Date palms leaned over pools the color of beaten bronze. Yusuf traded a copy of the Sheikh's commentary on Surah Maryam for a plate of lamb and a place to sleep beneath a thatched awning. There he met Lena, a cartographer's daughter with quick eyes and ink-stained fingertips. She traced circles on a goatskin map, marking wells and wadis as though sketching the arteries of the earth. When Yusuf told her why he traveled, she laughed softly. Maps only show where other people have been, she said. Sometimes you need a story instead. That night she slipped a folded parchment into his satchel. Open it when you can no longer see the horizon, she whispered. Yusuf wanted to ask 100 questions, but dawn tugged him onward. As he left, the smell of cardamom and charcoal drifted from the town like a benediction. Days blurred into dunes. The compass was useless, its glass shattered long ago, yet Yusuf kept it close, a relic of intention, if not direction. Each time uncertainty curled cold fingers around his resolve, he recited Ayat al-Kursi, the throne verse, feeling its cadence drum courage into his ribs. He observed the 5 prayers not by sun or shadow, but by how urgently his heart ached for pause. At Far he thanked God for breath. At Dur he thanked him for endurance, at Asr for guidance, at Maghrib for mercy, at Isha for the promise of another dawn. The desert answered in silence, but the silence felt inhabited by wind, by possibility, by God. On the edge of exhaustion, he stumbled into a salt flat where mirages danced like glass serpents. The sky and ground fused into a silver sheet, and sound evaporated. With each step, the crust cracked under his sandals, releasing the smell of ancient seas. Here, horizon lost meaning. Memory telescoped time until he was certain he had always walked this endless mirror and always would. Panic crowded his lungs. Then he remembered Lena's parchment. He unrolled it with trembling fingers. A single line of poetry was scrawled across the fibers, looping and looping until the words became a river. Seek the place where the fish forgets the sea. Beneath it, a charcoal sketch of a shoreline fed by twin currents, one black as night, the other luminous. Yusuf stared until the ink lines shifted, convincing his weary eyes they were moving water. He folded the parchment and felt a glimmer of direction, even if only imagined, burst behind his sternum like a flare. Night fell. A new moon left the plains inkier than a closed book, but distant lightning stitched faint pulses along the horizon. Yusuf followed those flickers, praying they heralded water rather than war. At dawn, the salt flat ended abruptly, giving way to cracked earth peppered with low shrubs. The lightning had danced above a river gorge, cleaving the desert like a scar. Two torrents met there, one muddy with mountain clay, the other clear as melted quartz. Yusuf collapsed to his knees, tears hot on his cheeks, the banks of both rivers reflecting the blush of sunrise. He cupped his palms into the cool flow and drank until his ribs ached with fullness. Then he noticed a figure crouched on a flat rock midstream, cloaked in sun-bleached wool, face shadowed by a hood. The figure traced something on the rock surface with a fingertip, then washed the mark away with river water. Yusuf's pulse hammered. Every story he had heard said Kaider wore no title, no crown, only the patience of someone who conversed with the unseen. Yet standing, no, crouching, before him was merely a man. Yusuf's voice broke the hush. "Peace be upon you." The man looked up, eyes green as submerged cedar. Silence answered, a silence dense enough to dislodge Yusuf's carefully rehearsed supplication. Finally the man spoke, his voice a current beneath still water. "And upon you peace, seeker." He stepped onto the bank with a grace that suggested the river had parted for him. "Why do you chase horizons that recede?" Yusuf reached for the Qur'an in his satchel, fingers brushing the cracked spine. "Because the book calls us to ponder its signs," he said. "Because I believe knowledge is more than pages and memory." The man studied him with an expression that was neither kindness nor indifference, but something older, a patience that belonged to stone shaped by centuries of wind. Belief is a bridge, but crossing means losing sight of both shores. He gestured toward the confluence of rivers. "Tell me, Yusuf, what do you see?" Yusuf opened his mouth, then closed it. Words crowded each other, none adequate. "Finally, I see water tasting two directions and becoming one." The hint of a smile tugged the stranger's mouth. He dipped his fingers again. "Fish swim here until they forget there was ever a choice." He flicked droplets onto the earth, where they sank with a hiss. "Will you forget your choice, Yusuf?" The question unsettled him. He wanted to say yes, yet feared what surrender demanded. "I want to learn," he said instead. "Then walk with me," the man replied, turning toward a narrow path that wound along the gorge. "But promise you will not question what you witness until I choose to explain." Yusuf hesitated. He recalled Moses' rash promise and swift regret. Yet what was the alternative? Turn back to the desert? Chase mirages? He glanced at the battered compass, its empty needle chamber reflecting morning light like an accusing eye. He tucked it away, inhaled, and followed. Yusuf trailed the stranger up the narrow gorge path until stone replaced sand and the smell of water replaced dust. The trail climbed in broken switchbacks, sometimes edged by thorny acacia, sometimes carved straight into the cliff face. Not once did the stranger glance back to be sure Yusuf remained. He seemed guided by another sense, as though the rhythm of Yusuf's footsteps echoed inside his own pulse. By midday, they reached a plateau where limestone boulders lay strewn like forgotten monuments and scrub grass pushed through cracks in the rock. Wind whipped Yusuf's cloak against his calves and carried with it the faint roar of surf, impossible this far inland, yet undeniable. The stranger stopped beside a boulder, pressed his palm to its pitted surface, and closed his eyes. Yusuf hovered, uncertain whether to speak. In the silence he heard a low hum, at first like trapped bees, then like a chant whose consonants blurred into vibration. The Quran teaches that every atom glorifies God. Yusuf remembered, even if you do not understand their glorification. The stranger's hand lifted, the hum died, he moved on without a word. Yusuf followed, senses pricked. The plateau narrowed to a ledge that overhung a chasm so deep the air seemed to fall into it. Far below, a river twisted, its waters veined with silt. A wooden footbridge spanned the abyss, planks weather-gray, ropes frayed almost to threads. 3 men waited at the near side, arguing in harsh whispers. Their boat, laden with sacks of grain and basket chickens, had grounded on a sandbar upriver, and now they debated whether to cross on foot for help or risk waiting for the tide to lift them free. The stranger walked past them without pause and placed one foot on the bridge. The middle plank snapped under his weight. He caught the support cable and swung to the far side as easily as a cat clearing a courtyard wall. Then he knelt and with a small knife sawed through 2 more support ropes. The men shouted curses. Yusuf's breath snagged. With 4 swift cuts the bridge sagged, split, and tumbled into the ravine. The stranger sheathed his knife, dusted his hands, and continued along the cliff as though bridges were illusions all along. Yusuf's mind raced with protest, but memory of the promise, no questions, sealed his lips. Instead, he retraced their steps, descended a lower trail, and discovered a fallen cedar wedged against the cliff like a natural ramp. By balancing on its trunk, he crossed the chasm where the bridge had been. When he caught up, the stranger was crouched beside a shallow pool in which a single silverfish glimmered. He tilted the pool's flat stone rim, spilling half the water. The fish flipped into a crack, disappeared. Yusuf stared, appalled, but the stranger had already risen. Toward dusk they entered a village where low cottages hugged terraced barley fields. Smoke curled from clay chimneys. The call to Maghrib floated through peach-blushed air. The stranger went straight to a cottage whose door hung askew, its hinges bright with new iron. Inside, a widow sat spinning wool while her twin sons stacked dried dung for fuel. Their father's debt had left them penniless. They eked survival from a patch of earth no larger than a prayer rug. The stranger greeted the woman, knelt near the eastern wall, and began prying up loose stones. Yusuf knelt too, thinking the man meant to repair damage. Instead, the stranger lifted an entire slab, revealing a cavity packed with coins crusted green by years of secrecy. He relayed the stone, sealing the treasure again, spread fresh mortar over the seam, and swept loose grit so no trace remained. Then he left without accepting the widow's bewildered thanks. Outside the village, the stranger finally spoke. Night will fall cold. We'll make camp beyond the almond grove. Yusuf's restraint cracked. Why did you destroy the bridge those traders needed? Why doom that fish to die in dry rock? Why hide wealth the widow and her boys could use? As the questions poured out, a weight lifted from Yusuf's chest but settled heavier on his conscience. He had broken his word. The stranger faced him beneath the first pinpricks of starlight. Did I not say you could not bear with me? His gaze held neither anger nor triumph, only sorrow as old as the stones they traversed. Yet because your heart strains at its tether, I will explain. The bridge was rotten. It would have collapsed mid-crossing tomorrow under the weight of a wedding procession. Better to lose planks than lives. The fish carried spores of a sickness that would have poisoned downstream wells. Better for one creature to perish than 100 children. The widow's wall hides wealth her husband buried for those boys. Had she found it now, the lender who hunts her debt would seize it. When the boys reach manhood, the debt will die with the contract, and the treasure will free them. These were acts of mercy, though mercy sometimes wears the mask of cruelty. Yusuf flushed with shame and awe. Verses from Surah Al-Kahf unfurled in his mind like banners, Moses' impatience, Khidir's cryptic deeds, the final unveiling of wisdom. He dropped to his knees. Forgive me. Every question was a fracture in my trust. The stranger's voice gentled. The fractures were necessary. Gold is purified in fire, Yusuf. So is certainty. He motioned toward a hollow where wild thyme carpeted the ground. Rest. Tomorrow patience will weigh more than food. Sleep teased but would not claim him. Above, the Milky Way spilled across the sky like liquid scripture. Yusuf wondered how many galaxies sang praises beyond human hearing. Near midnight he rose, performed ablution with dew collected on almond leaves, and prayed 2 units, seeking forgiveness for arrogance. When he finished, he felt the stranger's presence behind him, as quiet as moonlight on stone. Your prayer reached past the stars, the man said, settling beside him. Tell me what you fear most. Yusuf thought of the shattered compass, the dead sheik, Lena's quiet confidence. I fear discovering that knowledge ends and finding myself still hungry. The stranger traced a circle in dust. Knowledge ends when desire ends. Desire ends when souls meet their maker. Until then, hunger is proof of life. He swept the circle away and stood. Come dawn, we cross the valley of glass. There, reflection deceives even angels. Keep your gaze on the ground between your feet. They set out before first light. The valley turned out to be a vast expanse of volcanic obsidian shattered by heat, but polished by centuries of wind-driven sand. Each shard mirrored sunrise so perfectly that horizons multiplied in dizzying fractals. Yusuf fought vertigo, staring only at the stranger's heels. Midway, a camel skeleton lay half-buried, its bleached ribs cradling a leather satchel. The stranger paused, retrieved a weather-cracked journal, and slipped it into his robe without comment. Curiosity coiled in Yusuf's chest, but he bit his tongue. Hours later, the obsidian gave way to red clay hills scarred by narrow gullies. They crested a ridge and found a caravan under attack. A dozen bandits on wiry horses circled wagons while merchants brandished scimitars with desperate bravado. Screams tangled with the clash of metal. Yusuf reached instinctively for the dagger at his belt, one he had never used on anything more than rope, and froze when the stranger raised a hand. "Do not interfere," he said. His tone carried iron finality, yet he himself strode forward. Instead of drawing a weapon, he shouted a single phrase in a dialect Yusuf didn't recognize. Bandits wheeled toward him, startled. Their leader, a man with a scar splitting his lower lip, spurred forward, blade gleaming. The stranger kept walking. At 20 paces, he dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead to the dust and sujud. Shock rippled through the bandits. One dismounted, approached, and after a tense heartbeat knelt as well. Like dominoes folding, every bandit slid to their knees. Silence swallowed the battlefield. Even the merchants held their breath. The stranger rose, whispered to the leader, then turned away. Without a word, the bandits mounted and rode off, kicking up ochre plumes that quickly settled. Merchants surged forward with gratitude, offering bolts of silk, spices, a cask of sweet water. The stranger accepted nothing, only asked for directions to the coastal cliffs of Safar. When the caravan moved on, Yusuf exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "What did you say to them?" "That all of us kneel eventually," the stranger replied. Then, softer, "The Qur'an reminds, to God prostrates whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth. Sometimes we merely hurry the inevitable." 2 days later, the scent of salt thickened the air. They reached Safar at sunset. Chalk cliffs plunging into a turquoise sea, gulls wheeling through spray. Boats bobbed in a crescent harbor. Beyond, whitewashed homes climbed terraces glittering with lamplit glass. The stranger led Yusuf past fishermen mending nets to a weathered pier where an old dhow rocked gently. Its hull was patched with mismatched timber, its sail a quilt of cloth scraps, yet it floated with improbable grace. A bearded captain emerged, eyes shining with a recognition that transcended sight. He bowed to the stranger, then embraced him. No word passed, only understanding. The stranger turned to Yusuf. "Your journey continues across waters. Mine veers elsewhere." He pressed the weather-cracked journal into Yusuf's hands. "Inside, you will read what I cannot yet speak. Guard it until the right moment, then surrender it as readily as I give it now." Panic flared in Yusuf's chest. "I am not ready. I still have questions." "You always will," the stranger said, smiling. "That is the gift." He placed a hand over Yusuf's heart. "Recite Ayat al-Nur tonight. Let the verse of light guide you where compass and star cannot." Then he stepped back, and before Yusuf could frame another plea, the stranger vanished among the pier crowds as though the sea had swallowed him without a ripple. Yusuf boarded the dhow. As sailcloth kissed the wind and the coastline shrank to a pale line, he opened the journal. On the inside cover, in Lena's looping script, were the words, "Maps mark where stories begin, not where they end." Beneath, in the stranger's crisp hand, a single ayah, "Above every possessor of knowledge is one more knowing." Yusuf closed the book, pressed it to his chest, and let the horizon, no longer a mirage but a promise, pull him forward on currents of salt and faith. Wind poured into the patched sail like revelation caught in canvas, and the dhow surged northeastward across a jade expanse where sky and water traded colors all day long. Nights brought a vault of stars so clear Yusuf felt he could thread a needle with them. Days exploded with sunlight so white it seemed to erase every shadow inside him. He sat near the bow, journal balanced on his knees, murmuring Ayat al-Nur, "Allahu Nuru el-Samawati wa el-Ar," until the Arabic became heartbeat, until the verse's imagery of lamps and glass and sacred oil bled into everything he saw. The sail glimmered like polished crystal, the mast burned with an unseen flame that neither of east nor west, and the sea itself turned to liquid light. The captain, Umar ibn Halim, watched him with the gentle amusement of a father observing a child's first prayer. Umar's beard was salt-white, his eyes sparrow-bright. He navigated by reading the wind on his palms, tracing invisible script across weathered skin. On the third evening he sat beside Yusuf, offered a cup of kawa, and asked what inscription so occupied him. Yusuf showed the journal's cryptic pages, sketches of constellations whose names shifted if you stared too long, diagrams of water wheels that lifted nothing but moonlight, fragments of poetry and languages Yusuf half recognized: Hebrew, Syriac, an Aramaic dialect older than roofs. Umar ran a finger along one line of spidery calligraphy. "This verse," he said, "is from the Kitab al-Zuhul, a treatise lost when the Abbasid House of Wisdom was burned." "How did it find you?" "A man whose name I don't know placed it in my care," Yusuf replied, surprised to hear the steadiness in his own voice. The captain nodded as though such gifts were common along this sea. "Then guard it the way you would guard prayer, open when needed, closed when not." He tapped the page twice, stood, and returned to the helm. On the seventh night the wind died as if God had whispered Kuan and the world paused mid-breath. The dhow drifted on dark water mirrored so perfectly that every star appeared twice, once above, once below, until it seemed the boat sailed an invisible ribbon between heaven and its reflection. The crew whispered that such stillness meant the deep was listening. One man recited Surah Al-Rahman to sate whatever jinns lingered beneath the keel. Just before far a fog bank rolled in, thick as unspun wool. Sailors lit a lantern at the bow, its glow pushed only an arm's length before the mist swallowed it. Umar ordered silence so the ship could hear hazards ahead, but what reached them was music, a plaintive flute weaving through the fog like a thread of silver sound. No one could tell direction. One moment it drifted off port, the next from the stern, yet always too far to belong to any mortal deck. Yusuf felt the melody hook a memory of childhood. His mother humming a lullaby descended from Andalusian courts, its notes curling around Quranic cadences. His eyes stung. He moved to stand, but the captain caught his sleeve. "Stay," Umar murmured. Funan Albar, the artist of the sea, sing to lure restless hearts overboard. The song swelled. The dhow rocked though no wind stirred. Rigging creaked like bones shifting in sleep. Then the sea under the port side bloomed with light, swirling aquamarine shapes rising just beneath the surface, their outlines human yet rippling as though carved from water itself. Crewmen gasped the name of Allah. Yusuf's pulse slammed against his ribs. The figures glided alongside, luminous faces unreadable, eyes opalescent. One raised a hand, webbed with light, and the flute's voice sharpened, beckoning. Yusuf clutched the journal, knuckles bloodless. The stranger's final instruction, "Let the verse of light guide you where compass and star cannot," burned across his thoughts. Instinct moved him. He opened to the page where Ayat al-Nur had been meticulously copied in emerald ink and began to recite aloud. "God is the light of the heavens and the earth." His voice wavered, but each word struck the mist like a spark. The shape slowed, the flute faltered. Yusuf's breath steadied. He continued, "Picture of the niche, the lamp, the blessed olive tree whose oil would almost glow even if untouched by fire." With the final phrase, "And God sets forth parables for mankind, and God is knowing of all things," the spectral figures dissolved into swirling planktonic luminance, the flute faded into the hush. And the fog thinned enough for the first hint of breeze to ripple the sail. Dawn painted the horizon coral. Umar clasped Yusuf's shoulder. "We are 2 days from Khalat al-Rimal," he said, naming a port city rumored to house a library built entirely of glass. "It seems your verse steered us back to wind." Khalat al-Rimal revealed itself like an opal set in sandstone cliffs. Buildings of veined marble rose tier upon tier, crowned with domes glazed the green of spring palms. Minarets lanced the sky, calling the faithful. Bazaars spilled spices that smelled of cinnamon and cedar. Yet what drew pilgrims across continents was the Beit al-Zujaj, house of glass, where every wall, shelf, and stair was cut from translucent blocks quarried in a long-extinct volcano. Manuscripts glimmered behind crystal panes, scrolls floated like preserved butterflies in shafts of refracted sun. Yusuf entered barefoot, pulse drumming. Inside, silence shimmered, a hush so complete he heard the blood in his ears. Scholars in indigo robes drifted like shadows, consulting codices with tools of feathered would lest a breath scratch the ages. At the center stood a reading table around which lamps arranged themselves in the precise geometry of Ayat al-Nur's niche. Here he found Fatima bint Rafiq, archivist and polymath whose commentaries on comparative scripture were whispered to have turned skeptics into devotees. Fatima's eyes, deep brown flecked with gold, assessed the journal the moment Yusuf laid it before her. She touched its leather the way one might touch a pulse. "This binding is Syrophoenician," she said, voice low as turning pages. "7th century. How came you by it?" "By trust one pray to deserve," Yusuf answered. He recounted the stranger, the map that became a river, the valley of glass. When he finished, Fatima nodded once. "Some books choose their readers. Let us see what this one wills. She unrolled a sheet of milky mica across the table, placed the journal atop it, and lit a small lamp of clear oil. Light passed through mica, through parchment, and revealed layers of ink buried beneath visible script, palimpsests, earlier writing scraped away but never fully gone. Glyphs flared in violet. Fatima angled a lens. Words emerged in Persian. Seek the mouth of the river that swallows light. Beneath that, Greek. When the mirror drinks the dawn, the door will unlock. Beneath that, in faint Kufic calligraphy, knowledge is a trust, and God is witness. Fatima exhaled like one tasting rare honey. These layers were written generations apart. Someone carried this book farther than any caravan. She looked up. Do you know the River of Night? Yusuf shook his head. It flows beneath the plateau of mirrors, deep in the mountain kingdom of Pharasa. Pilgrims say no star shines there, yet those who walk its banks by moonless night see their path illuminated from within the stones. She closed the journal. I believe your journey points there. Trepidation pricked Yusuf's resolve, but desire outshouted fear. Will you come? I serve this library, she said, but her gaze lingered on the journal as though it hummed a chord she alone could hear. Still, every text yearns to be read fully. I will guide you as far as the plateau, then return. They prepared swiftly. Yusuf traded the Dow captain's parting gift, a coil of Damascus silk, for 2 sturdy horses and provisions of dried figs, goat cheese, and water skins lined with silver leaf to keep them cool. Fatima armed herself with a recurved bow, explaining that bandits respected distance more than courage. Yusuf carried only his dagger and the journal in a waterproof pouch. The road rose from coastal plain into cedar-clad foothills. Evening muezzins echoed behind them. Ahead, peaks speared cloud banks bruised purple by dusk. They rode in companionable quiet punctuated by bursts of discourse. Fatima spoke of Ibn Arabi's concept of the imaginal realm, a world as real as matter yet accessed by perception purified through worship and wonder. Yusuf shared Sheikh Ibrahim's teaching that every Quranic parable nested infinite interpretations like pearls within pearls. At camp they debated whether Khidr's severing of the boat in Surah Al-Kahf was a mercy only in hindsight or already mercy in the moment, unseen but present. Stars eavesdropped. On the 4th day, while crossing a high meadow, they encountered a procession of refugees, men and women with soot-smeared faces leading children whose eyes flickered like spent lanterns. Their village, they said, had burned when lightning struck the cedar roofs. They marched toward Khalid al-Rimal seeking aid. Yusuf's throat tightened at their ash-streaked skin, their stunned silence. He offered water, but the skins were nearly empty. Fatima knelt beside a girl clutching a charred doll. From her saddlebag, she drew a scroll case of blown glass and unstoppered it. Cool mist billowed forth condensed mountain air she had trapped at dawn. The refugees inhaled, eyes widening as moisture slicked their cracked lips. Fatima gave them the case, instructing they breathe its vapor sparingly. The girl pressed the doll to Fatima's hand in thanks. Fatima accepted, tucking the soot-black doll into her cloak. They rode on. Yusuf asked why she had parted with so rare an artifact. Because healing begins in the lungs, then reaches the soul, she said. Her voice trembled, not with regret, but with the rawness of compassion. Yusuf thought of the stranger's words, mercy wearing the mask of cruelty. He decided sometimes mercy wore the mask of extravagance, giving more than practical. That night, near the tree lean, a storm unfurled, lightning shredded cloud bellies, thunder rolled like mountains grinding together. They sheltered under a rocky overhang. Rain slapped stone sheets across the gorge below, turning dry gullies to cataracts. Fatima built a fire in a pocket of dry sand while Yusuf recited prayers seeking refuge with God from the evil of what he created. Between thunderclaps he heard another sound, stone cracking. He crawled to the mouth of the overhang. Across the gorge a slab the size of a minaret sheared from its cliff and slammed into emptiness, taking with it a line of ancient pines. The roar drowned thought. When dust cleared, Yusuf saw the fallen stone had bridged the gorge perfectly, forming a natural causeway along their intended path. He looked at Fatima. Her eyes mirrored his awe. The Qur'an says he brings the living out of the dead, and the dead out of the living, she whispered. Perhaps he also brings passage out of peril. They crossed at dawn, hooves clanging on still cool rock. Beyond lay the plateau of mirrors, a windswept expanse of mica tiles fractured by frost and fused by sun until each slab reflected sky with unsettling fidelity. No vegetation grew, no insect crawled. Clouds above seemed to drift both overhead and underfoot, rendering distance impossible to judge. Fatima dismounted, tied her horse to Yusuf's, and walked, boots crunching glassy flakes. Look only at the horizon, she advised. If you stare into the reflections you'll lose direction, Some pilgrims wander until thirst takes them. They advanced in measured silence. Now and then Yusuf glimpsed motions at the edges of sight, his own reflection delayed by half a heartbeat, or a shadow where none should be. Each time he felt vertigo nibble his certainty, he recited the opening of Surah Al-Fatiha, letting the words align his inner compass, guide us upon the straight path. Hours stretched. The sun climbed, but its heat failed to penetrate the mirrored ground, which glowed cold as moonlit marble. At noon they reached a fissure where the plateau cracked open, revealing a stair of natural quartz descending into shadow. From below rose a hush like breath drawn through reeds, the hush of water moving in darkness. Fatima placed a hand on Yusuf's arm. "The rest is yours alone," she said. "My vow to the library binds me here." Yusuf's pulse quickened. "Will I see you again?" "If God writes reunion into our pages," she said, smiling with the serenity of librarians who know stories rarely end at the last line. She pressed the soot-black doll into his palm. A reminder that knowledge without mercy is ash. Then she stepped back. Yusuf tucked the doll into his satchel beside the journal, lifted a torch, and began the descent. Echoes swallowed his footsteps. Pale veins of luminescence threaded the quartz, pulsing like heartbeat. The air cooled to a cavern hush. After 40 steps the stair opened onto an underground river, its current black yet flecked with sparks, constant, silent, reminiscent of the luminous forms in the night sea. Here, light did not pierce the water birthed light. Yusuf knelt, filled his cupped hands. The liquid glowed between his fingers before fading to translucence the instant it touched air. He drank. It tasted of nothing and everything. The first sip of water after fasting, the salt of tears shed at dawn prayer, the sweetness of dates in Ramadan's last minutes. Warmth radiated through his chest, settling behind his eyes until the dark brightened. Across the river a stone archway rose, carved with swirling script Yusuf recognized as early Kufic but could not decipher. Above the arch, a niche held an unlit lamp shaped like twin seas merging, one clear, one dark. Instinct guided him. He opened the journal to a blank page, tore it free, laid it in the lamp, and recited Ayat al-Nur once more. Flame leapt without tinder. The river answered, its sparks intensified, swirling upward to fill the archway with shimmering curtain. Through it Yusuf glimpsed a corridor lined with shelves bearing countless books whose pages turned themselves in a wind that seemed to blow inward from the farthest shore of time. His breath caught. He understood then that the journey was not to claim knowledge, but to serve as its conduit, one more link in a chain stretching back to Adam, forward to the final day when every secret would stand bare. He stepped toward the arch. Behind him the torch guttered and died, yet the river's glow held steady, lighting his path. The curtain of living light breathed around Yusuf, inhaling him into a corridor that felt both vast and intimate, the way a single heartbeat can echo the cadence of a lifetime. Shelves soared beyond sight, chiseled from a material that resembled glass yet hummed like struck bronze. Each shelf hovered without visible support, books gliding along their lengths like planets in a silent orbit. Some tomes were bound in hammered silver, others in bark or braided sinew. A few pulsed as though each page were a shuttered eye blinking memories into darkness. None bore titles. Instead, thin filaments of light trailed from their spines, converging into a woven canopy overhead, a constellation rewritten with every turn of a page. Yusuf took a single step and felt the floor ripple beneath his sandals, not collapsing but shifting, recalibrating to his presence. Words from the Qur'an settled in his thoughts. He created the heavens and the earth in truth. He wraps the night over the day and wraps the day over the night. Truth, wrapping, unwrapping, this place embodied that divine rhythm. Knowledge was no stack of static volumes. It was a pulse, a tidal breathing of revelation. From somewhere deeper came the rustle of pages turning themselves, accompanied by a faint chime like distant gongs struck underwater. Following the sound, Yusuf passed alcoves where illuminated manuscripts floated mid-air, their gilded letters rearranging into fresh commentaries even as he watched. Ink bled into new patterns, then locked into place as if responding to an invisible diction. He glimpsed diagrams of stars orbiting not a sun but a luminous word at the center, Kuan, B. Another page displayed the Red Sea parting in layers of crystal geometry, as though the miracle recorded in Exodus and in the Quranic narration of Musa split not just water but the lattice of reality itself. Ahead, a circular chamber unfolded like the eye of a cyclone, shelves spiraling upward. At its heart stood a single lectern of white marble veined with the same faint green that sheathed the prophet's burial chamber in Medina. Suspended above it hovered a book larger than any Yusuf had ever beheld, its cover a mosaic of mirrored shards that reflected nothing in the visible world, only flickers of thought glancing through Yusuf's mind. As he drew closer, the book reclined as if exhaling, opening to reveal pages blank and luminous, waiting. A voice rippled through the chamber, low and granular, like wind combing a dune at midnight. Right. Yusuf glanced around but saw no one. The voice came again, from everywhere and nowhere. Write what you carry. His satchel felt suddenly heavy, its leather straining at the seams. He set it down, drew out the soot-black doll, the battered compass, the map that became a river, and the journal. When he placed these on the lectern, they did not thud but dissolved into pale columns of light that corkscrewed upward before cascading across the blank page. Ink formed. First sketches of dunes, then Lena's looping script, then the stranger's emerald ayah, then Fatima's gift of mist. Each memory solidified as text, yet remained luminous, sliding across the parchment like words on waves. Yusuf felt a tug at the base of his skull, a request, gentle but firm, for more. Reluctantly, he pressed his fingertips to the surface, and memories flowed out unbidden. His mother reciting Surah Yasin while bread dough rose on the windowsill, Sheikh Ibrahim's final counsel, the scent of cardamom drifting from an oasis town at dawn. The silver fish trapped in a crack of dry rock. Every detail became script. When at last the current eased, he stood hollowed yet transcendent, as if fasting not from food but from the weight of lived moments. The voice returned, now edged with warmth. Memory is clay shaped by guidance. What shape do you seek? I seek understanding, Yusuf whispered. Why we thirst for knowledge even knowing it may drown us. Turn the page. He obeyed. Words inked themselves in real time, forming a dialogue. Question. Does the seeker hunger because the banquet exists? Or does the banquet exist because the seeker hungers? Answer. Both. Desire and provision spiral each other like twin strands, each birthing the other by God's leave. Question. What is the first veil of certainty? Answer. Naming. Lines unfurled faster than Yusuf could read, yet each sentence branded his mind. Certainty is not the absence of doubt, but the mastery of doubt's compass. Mercy is the arithmetic of divine algebra, solving equations hidden in grief. Then, Yusuf is a derivative of yasa, to increase. Increase cannot be contained, it must overflow. When the ink stilled, the page pulsed once, and the book closed itself. The objects Yusuf had surrendered coalesced at its surface, but changed. The doll now gleamed ivory white. The compass needle floated free in liquefied glass, pointing everywhere at once. The journal was bound anew in sapphire silk threaded with gold veins. Take them, the voice said, and deliver them where they are needed. But know the price. You may carry only what I return. All other memories you laid bare remain within these pages. They are safe, yet inaccessible to you until your task is fulfilled. A chill rushed through Yusuf. To lose memory was to lose the self, wasn't it? Panic flared, then dimmed when he realized grief felt muted, as though God had patted the wound. He bowed. Where do I deliver them? The chamber darkened, shelves folded like wings, and the floor softened into sand. When Yusuf raised his head, he stood beneath an indigo sky strung with unfamiliar constellations. The great book had vanished. Before him stretched a barren plain of basalt spires glowing faintly blue, as though moonlight seeped from the rock. In the near distance flickered tints woven of starlight, clustered around a black cube no taller than a shepherd's hut. He recognized nothing of this landscape, yet certainty rooted in his chest. This was Furesa, mountain kingdom of the plateau's legends. Breath clouded in the frigid air. The compass in his hand spun, then steadied, pointing toward the cube. He followed. The tints belonged to a nomad tribe whose skin bore the same luminescence as the basalt. They greeted him not with words, but with a hand over the heart, eyes reflecting candle-bright curiosity. Yusuf responded likewise. An elder approached, his beard braided with shards of crystal that chimed against each other. He gestured for Yusuf to sit beside a brazier where coals burned without smoke. After silence ripened like fruit, the elder spoke Arabic in an accent of snow-soft consonants. We are the Bani Zujaj, descendants of the smith who forged the lamp in the Ayah of Light. This, he indicated the cube, is the lampstone, fragment of that first forging. For 13 generations it has shone without flame, guiding caravans through the night. Yesterday, it dimmed. Yusuf's gaze slid to the cube, matte, lifeless. Why? Knowledge has been hoarded, the elder said, its flow dammed by fear. The lampstone brightens only when a seeker surrenders his own certainty to guide others. Yusuf's heart hammered. The library's transaction, his forfeited memories, was that surrender enough? He retrieved the ivory doll, the compass, the reborn journal. I was told to deliver these. Children gathered, moth-drawn to the relic's faint glow. The elder accepted them, placing each on the cube. At first nothing. Then filament-thin cracks mapped the stone's surface, filling with light that pooled, brightened, and at last burst through, bathing the camp in silver radiance. Gasps rippled through the tribe. The elder's eyes brimmed. "God is generous," he whispered. In the cube's glow, Yusuf saw his reflection in hundreds of tiny facets, a man stripped of certain memories yet luminous with possibility. Gratitude swelled, tinged with ache for what had been surrendered. The elder touched Yusuf's shoulder. "Stay with us tonight. Tomorrow, the river of night must receive you. Only a heart glimmering with borrowed light can follow its course without being swallowed." Before dawn, the tribe accompanied Yusuf to the gorge where the river surfaced from the mountain's root, a torrent darker than pitch, its current silent. Yet within the blackness shimmered pinpricks of starlight, as though all the world's night skies had melted into water. The elder handed Yusuf a lantern made of seamless glass, empty of oil. "When your need is greatest," he said, "recite the opening of Surah Al-Kahf. The lantern will obey." Yusuf bowed. The first step into the river of night felt like stepping through velvet. It neither soaked his garments nor resisted his weight. Instead, he walked on a surface just shy of liquid, each footfall sending concentric rings of faint starlight rippling outward. He heard no splash, only a low hum rising from the water, a lullaby of constellations. The river curved into a tunnel whose walls shone with mica veins, reflecting the water's light in dizzying spirals. Yusuf recited Al-Fatiha under his breath to anchor his senses. After some timeless traverse, a minute or an age, dark shapes appeared beneath the surface, memories not his own, drifting like lanterns extinguished under glass. He glimpsed Sheba's queen consulting Solomon, saw the prophet standing on Mount Safa calling Quraysh to heed, witnessed Galileo watching Jupiter's moons. Each vision hovered just long enough to sting him with wonder, then whisked downstream. Desire to peer deeper tugged like undertow. Yusuf recalled the elder's warning and forced his gaze forward. Yet one vision snared him, a boy in modern clothes, tears shining on his cheeks, kneeling on a crowded school hallway's linoleum floor, whispering Ayat al-Kursi while classmates jeered. Yusuf's chest clenched. Compassion overrode caution. He knelt, touched the water. The scene brightened. He saw the boy's lips move, "Guide me, Allah, guide me," and the jeers faded, replaced by radiant silence as if invisible hands shielded the child. The vision drifted away, leaving the water brighter. Yusuf rose, soul quivering. The compass at his belt vibrated, the needle fixed forward. He resumed walking, and soon the tunnel widened into a cavern where the river plunged underground, forming a waterfall of star-flecked darkness. Beside it stood a figure in cloak and hood, tracing a circle on stone with a fingertip. Green eyes lifted, Kaider, or the stranger who refused names, unchanged by time. "You bring the lamp of others' mercy in your chest," he said. His voice was the same current beneath still water. "Are you prepared to lose even that, if asked?" "I have no claim to keep what was gifted," Yusuf answered, surprised by the steadiness of his words. The stranger nodded, walked to the waterfall's lip, and placed his palm flat against it. The water parted like drapes, revealing an ascending staircase of obsidian lit by internal starlight. "This climb leads you back to the world where questions grow like orchard trees. Carry no answer as fruit, carry only seeds." He stepped aside. Yusuf hesitated, then recited the opening of Surah Al-Kahf as the elder instructed. "Did we not expand for you your chest?" The lantern flared to life, filled with pure lambent white that cast no shadow. He slung it at his hip. "Be patient with your own unfolding," the stranger said. "Above every possessor of knowledge is one more knowing." Yusuf began to climb. The steps were slick yet supported him with a firmness that felt like trust externalized. Halfway up, the waterfall closed behind, locking sound in hushed equilibrium. Yet somewhere far above Yusuf sensed dawn pressing its pale palm against the ceiling of stone, waiting to paint his journey in colors unseen. With each step he repeated the throne verse, letting it drum courage in his ribs. His Kursi extends over the heavens and the earth, and their preservation tires him not. The starlight in the lantern pulsed to the verse's rhythm, illuminating glyphs carved on each riser, fragments of languages extinct and unborn, nested meanings spiraling like DNA. The staircase ended beneath a round aperture where pre-dawn sky blushed with the faintest ember of rose. Yusuf emerged into crisp mountain air on a ridge overlooking horizons he did not recognize, valleys quilted with mist, forests silvered by moonset, villages no larger than prayer beads scattered on velvet plains. He set the lantern on a flat stone, the light condensed into a single beam pointing east. Far off, past layered hills, a faint glow marked civilization waking. Yusuf tightened his cloak, breathed the pine-cold air, and began the descent, each footstep striking sparks of resolve. Behind him the aperture sealed itself, leaving no trace of hidden stair or river, only a cliff face mosaicked with noctilucent stone. Yusuf did not look back. Memory, both lost and retained, pressed him forward, each unseen recollection guiding like wind fills a sail. The path ahead bent with promise and peril in equal measure, but his chest felt cavernous, expanded beyond its bones, ready to house valleys of unanswered questions. Dawn arrived not as a slow wash of color, but as an uncorking light burst over the horizon in a single, almost audible pop, drenching the ridge in liquid gold. Yusuf felt it strike his skin like notes from an unseen trumpet, sharp enough to sting, sweet enough to summon. He blinked against the glare and discovered, to his surprise, that the lantern at his hip no longer emitted light but absorbed it. Rays slid across its surface and vanished, leaving only a faint shimmer swirling inside like nucleating stardust. The Qur'an teaches that God causes the dawn to break, and in that moment Yusuf understood the verb not as a gentle easing but a deliberate fracture in darkness, a crack wide enough for revelation to pour through. The descent toward the valley path proved easier than anticipated, almost as if the ground pitched itself to meet each footfall. Wind carried the resinous perfume of pine and juniper. Somewhere below, a river fluted over stone, the same tone that had once tempted him on the sea but stripped now of menace, rendered pure invitation. Every few steps Yusuf found a new glyph etched into a boulder or carved in bark, scripts he recognized from the library's palimpsests, Coptic declarations of gratitude, Sogdian hymns to the dawn. Old Norse riddles that compared the soul to a whetstone hidden in tallow. They glowed faintly when he passed, as though acknowledging their courier. Knowledge, once hoarded, was leaking back into the world. Near noon, he reached a hamlet perched beside terraced fields of millet and saffron. Stone cottages wore roofs of sod sprouting wildflowers, red anemone, blue flax, and children chased one another between drying racks of crimson threads dyed with madder. An old woman spotted Yusuf from her porch, eyes narrowing first in suspicion, then softening when the lantern glimmered in response to her gaze. She motioned him closer, offered a wooden bowl of thick goat's milk yogurt sweetened with honey and shards of bee-laden comb. Gratitude tasted like sunlight solidified on his tongue. Word of the stranger with the captive dawn spread quickly. By evening he sat in the village square while elders gathered, each unrolling faded scrolls or brandishing charred codices rescued from long-ago fires. Their requests tumbled out. Could he interpret this fragment of hadith commentary missing its isnad? Could he decipher a prayer will etched in the angular script of steppe nomads long dispersed? Yusuf felt the emptiness where certain memories had been, yet when he placed a palm on each text the lantern brightened, and knowledge rose unbidden, not as recollection but as fresh spring. He heard himself speaking with a clarity greater than any he had possessed, explaining that the hadith shard belonged to an Andalusian commentary linking the prophet's night journey to the story of Moses and Khidr. That the prayer wheel's inscription mirrored a forgotten Quranic recitation style known as tarji, wherein each verse returns to a single refraining name of God, Alam, the All-Knowing. As night draped the valley, the villagers invited him to lead Maghrib in the tiny adobe masjid. He recited Surah Al-Kahf, voice trembling with resonance stolen from whatever realm the lantern touched. When he reached the verses describing Khidr, the air thickened, and many listeners wept without knowing why. Later they pressed gifts upon him, spindles of woven silk, jars of preserved walnuts, but he accepted only a strip of embroidered wool to wrap around the lantern, lest its light alarm less kind travelers. At dawn he set off again, carrying with him not possessions but a growing retinue of stories. A widow who swore her sleep was now filled with clear dreams of her dead husband thanking her for patience, a young shepherd who, after hearing Yusuf's readings, vowed to memorize the Qur'an so that the valleys might echo with its cadences the way rocks once echoed David's psalms. Every story felt like a seed lodging in fertile earth, exactly as the nameless stranger had warned. Miles further, the path forked beside a ruin, marble columns toppled in fractal heaps, capitals shattered like discarded chalices. Vines crawled the debris, flowering in indigo starbursts that perfumed the shade. Yusuf paused, recognizing shapes that matched a diagram from the journal, the hypothetical layout of a Hellenistic observatory rumored lost 2 millennia prior. He stepped closer, testing memory he no longer possessed, yet facts surfaced. This had been the Temple of Shards, where astronomers hammered mirrors of polished bronze to study planetary retrograde. No mortal had seen its remains for centuries. Beside a cracked plinth, a girl with raven braids knelt sketching on a slate. Her features carried the angular elegance of nomad tribes from the high steppes. When Yusuf's shadow crossed her page, she looked up without surprise. "I've been waiting," she said in flawless, lilting English. Something in her cadence pried at forgotten recesses. "Lena?" But Lena's eyes were almond amber, These were storm gray flicked with silver. The girl rose, dusted hem of a simple linen tunic, and extended the slate. On it, a map of the temple grounds overlaid with the symbol of two rivers merging. I followed your trail of echoes, she explained. Every village you left resonated like struck glass. Yusuf frowned softly. Who are you? A cartographer of things that do not yet exist, she answered, echoing Lena's words about stories being better than maps, but sharpened, updated, as though decades had passed. Call me Lala. She led him through the ruin, pointing out fragments of astrolabes fused into pillars, shards of stained glass containing equations written in golden cufic, elliptical orbits rendered as supplications. At the center lay a shallow bowl carved in polished porphyry, filled to its rim with dust paler than bone. Lale poured a vial of water into the bowl. The dust collapsed into spiraling channels that formed a miniature galaxy. Stars of quicksilver brightness popped into being, tracing the swirl of arms, a tiny Milky Way spinning slower than breath. This observatory consumed knowledge until it starved its own curiosity, Lale said. The scholars mapped skies, but never the wonder those skies inspired. Eventually, they looked down only to etch plates, not up. The temple crumbled the night a meteor shower wrote new verses across heaven that no one bothered to read. She met Yusuf's gaze. The book you found, the one that swallowed your memories, asked me to show you this. Books asking directions? He asked, a hint of wryness threading through awe. Some books are doorways. She nudged the bowl. And some bowls are universes. Watch. Before his eyes, the quicksilver stars flickered, extinguished, then reignited as glyphs, each star reshaping into a letter until the miniature galaxy spelled a single line in luminous Arabic. In the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. The phrase rose from the dust as vapor, dispersing overhead like incense, leaving the bowl empty save for rippling water. Yusuf felt the lantern vibrate. He unwrapped the wool and found its glass interior blooming with the same quicksilver letters. They roamed the surface like fireflies, rearranged, then settled into English. Return. To where? He whispered. But the lantern stilled, offering no coordinates. Lale crouched, tracing the emptied bowl. Scholars wrote an axiom, where knowledge closes, remembrance opens. Maybe remembrance is your next harbor. He remembered the schoolboy kneeling in the vision beneath the river of night, remembrance amid ridicule. Perhaps his path pointed not to hidden libraries, but to everyday corridors where thirst festered unnoticed. Rain clouds shouldered across the afternoon sky. Lale pressed a leather roll into his hands, a fresh map, blank except for a single arrow east. New stories want new cartographers, she said, stepping back. With the assuredness of someone who belonged to every horizon, she vanished among crumbled pillars, leaving only the scent of indigo blossoms. Yusuf continued east, each mile shedding altitude until tall cedar gave way to olive groves and fields of flax. News traveled faster than feet. By the time he entered the provincial capital of Barca, merchants already lined the bazaar whispering of a traveler bearing a lamp of captured dawn. They spoke also of a famine, grain ships delayed by blockade, storerooms dwindling. Mothers stood in bread queues before sunrise, hoping dough would stretch one more day. City officials promised caravans in a week. Bellies argued they could not wait. Yusuf moved through avenues thrumming with tension, past graffiti quoting ayat on charity scrawled beside curses aimed at hoarders. He felt the lantern grow heavier, its glow dim behind the wool. Every instinct screamed caution. Knowledge squandered could incite riots. Yet Sheikh Ibrahim had said oceans drown those who fear them. He made for the Grand Mosque, a structure of alternating sandstone and onyx bands, its central courtyard spacious enough to swallow a marketplace. After Asr prayer, he stepped onto the courtyard's low dais, custom kept for scholars delivering dars, and unwrapped the lantern. A collective gasp rippled. Guards shifted hands to sword hilts, unsure whether to defend or flee. I bring no miracles of my own, Yusuf began, voice steady as the calligrapher's hand he once was. Only reminders of miracles already among you. He recounted a parable, how Musa sought knowledge and discovered mercy can resemble cruelty, how Qaeda broke a ship to save sailors. Perhaps your grain shortage, he suggested, is a plank removed so greater loss does not occur. Or perhaps it is a test of whether you see your neighbor's hunger as your own. He lifted the lantern. Light reveals when it is shared. The glass brightened until courtyard stones glowed white. Shadows fled. In that radiance Yusuf saw faces unmasked, fear, envy, compassion, each laid bare. A baker whose storeroom bulged with wheat found his greed reflected in the lantern and bowed his head, tears streaking flower-pale cheeks. A governor accustomed to issuing decrees saw in that light the smallness of authority without accountability. One by one, people stepped forward, laying coins, sacks of lentils, wheels of cheese at the dais. The lantern's glow pulsed with every act of surrender. Officials declared granaries open at sunset. The riot that might have erupted dissolved into lines of orderly distribution. Children gathered crusts still warm, mothers exhaled. Yusuf felt each gesture ripple through the lantern like drops into a still pond. Knowledge had flowed back into mercy. That night, as city lamps burned low, he slipped away toward the outskirts, following a dirt road swaddled in fig trees. There, beneath a sky dusted with meteors, the shower that once ruined the Temple of Shards, he found the stranger waiting, hood down, face bare. Older than Yusuf remembered, yet eyes undiminished. "You seated questions," the stranger said. "See how swiftly they sprout mercy." Yusuf set the lantern on a stump. "My memories, will they return?" "Memories are birds," the stranger replied. "Some migrate, some nest, some sing only once at dawn. You lost none. You loan them to eternity. They will circle back when your cage can hold them without captivity." Yusuf accepted, feeling a peace both enormous and tender. "What now?" "Now you walk until the compass of gratitude points home. And when someone asks you for light, remember how easily dawn fits inside a glass." Moonlight glinted off the lantern as the stranger faded into night like ink into water. Yusuf lifted the wool strip to wrap the glass, but found it suddenly empty, its light dispersed. Panic fluttered until he realized dawn had begun, faint and resilient, lining the eastern sky. A new day would carry its own lamp. He turned the blank map Lala had given him. Under starlight, lines had appeared, not roads but verses, snatches of Qur'an and hadith, couplets from Rumi, fragments of Andalusian lullabies, the throne verse spiraling like a galaxy at the center. No destination marked, only paths of words. Yusuf smiled. Cartography indeed. He rolled the map, tucked it beneath his cloak, and stepped onto the road. Each stride felt lighter, buoyed by the certainty that the world, like the book, was still writing itself, and he, inked by mercy, had become part of the pen. Far behind, in the capital's tallest minaret, the muezzin began the dawn call, his voice threading through fig leaves and meteor dust alike, "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar." The words rode the wind, caught Yusuf mid-step, and lifted him forward into a horizon forever widening with questions, forever brightening with light.